Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nine Lives Podcast, the podcast where we dive into the transformative journeys of self-discovery, growth, and the messy, beautiful process of living multiple lives in one. I am Cassia, your host, and I'm so excited that you're here. I've washed my hair for this episode. Never before seen. Crazy, crazy stuff. So, today we're going to talk about something that is very, very highly requested from many of you. When I put it on socials, what would you like me to talk about? We've covered a whole range of topics so far in this season, and something that I have been kind of gathering information and ideas on for a while before I wanted to delve into it is the idea of overcoming plateaus. Finding your spark again and your motivation again after stagnation. This is something that I have recently kind of found my power with again, and something that I've been exploring a lot through, having a little bit more of a tough time and coming out the other side of it feeling more energized and knowing a little bit more about how and what it means to really re-find yourself, re-find your spark and reclaim your power after a period of what I would describe, I never want to say going backwards, because I don't think we ever go backwards. I don't think there's ever a purposeful or, I don't think there's ever a time where any mistakes we make don't teach us something or we don't learn things. But certainly there are periods where you feel like you're doing everything right and everything's going wrong. And it can be a really, really difficult time for a lot of people. So if you're feeling stuck or uninspired or like you're just spinning your wheels lately, this episode is for you. Today we're diving deep into overcoming plateaus and reigniting that spark of motivation when life feels stagnant. Whether it's your career, your fitness journey, creative projects, or just the everyday grind, we've all hit that point where forward momentum feels impossible. We've all been there, right? You're doing the workouts, you're eating the right things, you're journaling, using all the tools, but nothing is changing. Looking back at the last 4 years, I can't tell you how many times I've felt as if I'm doing everything right, but nothing is working. I'm doing the runs, I'm lifting the weights, I'm practicing gratitude, but nothing is changing. I'm left feeling really sad and stagnant, and I think the key to these periods is realizing that it's all a part of the process. It happens so slowly in such little ways, and then it happens huge. And this is something I think people need to understand a little bit more of, is we all expect change to be this huge, massive explosion of like color and feelings and gratitude and wonderful events and magnificent life goals. And while it is that, I think knowing that it happens so small and then it happens all at once is such a perfect way of framing this, knowing that the work that you do in silence and the work you do behind the scenes and the little everyday steps that you take, although it might feel like a plateau, is actually adding up to when it happens huge, is so important. I've been in a period of stagnation currently, and I have been for a year or so. Kind of like feeling like I'm spinning my wheels, so to say. Like everything I'm doing kind of isn't quite connecting. Like I've got that lock of the locking in, and I've like got it halfway down, but it's not quite driving into the lock, and I can't quite turn the key in the door. But I'm learning how not to have tantrums, and that's been life-changing. I think the reflex for so many of us is to kind of go into that victim mentality of like, oh my God, poor me, I'm doing everything right, but it's not happening. There must be something extraordinarily wrong with me. Everyone else has it easier. But that mentality will get us nowhere. And I remember for so many months watching other people online or reading books of people making these extraordinary changes for themselves. And for some reason, I'd kind of convinced myself that I was some freak of nature, that even though you applied the science and I did the runs and the walks and the journaling and everything, it just wouldn't happen for me, like in those periods of months where things had stopped changing, or I was perceiving change to not happen anymore, I just sit on my bathroom floor and be like, well, it's just not happening for me. For some reason, there's something wrong with me, but it's going to happen for everyone else. And I'm watching everyone else succeed. But, poor me. And I think that kind of mentality, although it can be quite seductive to fall into, is really important to make sure that you don't delve into too deeply. A big part of overcoming plateaus is in mindset. In fact, I'd say most of it is in mindset, and knowing that there is a way to make it through these periods of stagnation, but also knowing that periods of stalling are natural parts of life. We are like the forest, and we are nature, and we live and we die just as the forest does. And in those periods of when our flowers are wilting and coming down and turning into mulch and moss over the floor of the forest, it's really important to love yourself in those seasons, because in those seasons you're feeding the little mycelium under the forest floor, and you might not be blooming into a gorgeous flower just yet, but in that little period of rest and I don't know, in stillness or in no forward momentum, it's really important to remember to love yourself through it as well, and know that there are gems to be found in those periods. When I start to slip into that way of thinking, in the victim mentality, I often imagine myself as a horse. What's new? I'm just a horse on the plains. I'm a horse pulling a great wagon with all of my troubles in the back of the wagon. And it's heavy, man, and my legs hurt, and I want to stop. It feels like no matter how many steps I take, I can't get ahead, and the load just keeps piling up. I have two choices. I can sit down in the dust, break the wood of my wagon, and I don't make it any further, despite how much I've toiled and toiled to get this far. Or I get the bit between my teeth, I dig my hooves into the red earth and pull really hard. Realizing that the load is heavy because I want it to be heavy. I don't want to settle. And so I must pull on without the promise of a destination. Just knowing that I'm on my way, even if I can't see the signs, I'm on my way. And in the words of the great Ram Dass, you can do it like it's a great weight, or you can do it like it's part of the dance. And I remember when I first discovered Ram Dass's teachings, that one really stood out to me. Because often we can feel like the goals that we have and the life that we want is a great weight and a great burden on us. But, you can't complain about having a lot on your plate if your goal was to eat. And doing it like it's all a part of the dance is such a wonderful way to kind of bring a little bit of joy back into the feeling of that heaviness, because it is heavy, and it can feel very, very heavy when you do have all of these things you want to achieve, and you're finding it hard to fit it in your schedule, and you're finding it hard to find joy in it, or to find the balance and to see the fruits of your labor materialize in your physicality or in the life you'd like to live. It can be incredibly demotivating. So sometimes when you kind of release it a little bit and you're like, you know what, it's all a part of the dance. Step backwards are part of the dance. Step forward, step sideways, we're just dancing through this life. And that's a really wonderful way of looking at it. And it's something I try to let myself really lean into when I'm feeling sad about where I'm at in life, because at the end of the day, we are meant to be joyful creatures, and we're meant to be creatures who that aren't constrained by strict outcomes. We're organic beings, and you can't control what happens in life. And although it can be hard to break free of ruts and to find your spark again, it is possible. Let me tell you, back in November, when there were a few things happening in my personal and professional life that were things that I thought I would never get through, ever. I remember being in the kitchen and saying to my fiance, I cannot see a way through this. I can't see a time where I don't wake up sad and I don't stay up late at night ruminating over these things that are happening, and I can't see how my career will move past this. I can't see how I will move past this. And it's now the 8th of January as I record this, and I have moved past it. I am moving past it, and I still have little moments here and there. But the most beautiful thing is that even in the moment when there is so much great pain surrounding us, we truly believe that time will not heal. We think, well, not this time. I'll always feel the way I do. I'll always feel awful about it. But time does heal. Time really heals. And it's the great stretcher of things. And it's an amazing gift that is given to us, that as humans, we're so resilient and we can go forward through life and endure so much and come out the other side. And, it's the same when you go through grief, right? I've been through really a lot of grief in my life. I've lost a lot of people. I've lost a lot of people who have been very close to me in very sudden ways. And when that grief happens and the shock wears off and you think, I'll never ever feel okay about this, and I'll never feel okay again. And then one day it's a sunny afternoon in June and you suddenly feel a little bit better and you think, God, pain does pass and things do get better, and absolutely I can overcome. And that's the same for plateaus and feeling stagnant. Time is such a healer, but the only thing that matters is what you do with that time, because the time will pass anyway. So whether you spend it sulking and twiddling your thumbs, or you spend it moving on because you can and doing the things you feel are good for you, you will reap the rewards. You will reap the rewards at the end of the day. It's just about making that decision that you don't need to constantly be seeing the fruits of your labor in order to go towards your dreams. And let me tell you, the parts of my life and the parts of other people's lives who I look up to, the most extraordinary things happen after periods of really, really intense difficulty and a lot of stagnation. So I wanted to talk about how to break free from these ruts. But let's define the subject. So the plateau. What is a plateau? It's that frustrating period where you're putting in the work, but it feels like nothing is changing. You're not moving forward, you're not seeing progress, and maybe even you're starting to doubt yourself. This happens in so many areas of our life. In fitness, it's when your workouts stop delivering results. At work, it's when you feel you've hit a ceiling. Or creatively, it's that dreaded block where new ideas seem to vanish. But here's the thing. Plateau is not a failure. It's not the end of the road. It's just a pause, a moment to recalibrate. And more often than not, it's a gateway to your next breakthrough. As I said earlier, I have the honor of knowing many brilliant humans now through work, through this platform. And one thing I can tell you is that the greatest storms, the time of the most friction and pain and feeling like everything's falling apart, comes before the biggest breakthroughs. I've got friends who have been made redundant, lost a parent and a partner in the same week, but in that same year founded a wildly successful business. Pain can be used, not always, but it can be used. And really, I think this is something I've had to learn the hard way, is when something isn't for you and perhaps you are in a period of plateau because you might be barking up the wrong tree, so to say, or perhaps you're not following something that's aligned with you and isn't in your life path and isn't meant for you. That can also feel like a plateau. But those periods of like intense things falling apart and everything feeling like it's clicking out of place can often be the time just before it does. And I think so many of us give up just before we get to the point that it does come together. And that's where a lot of failures lie. So I would urge you, if you are in a period where it does feel like everything's crashing down around you, to try to trust the destruction of it. Although it can be incredibly difficult to do so, knowing that sometimes when it all falls apart, that's when it's going to come together, is a really empowering idea. So I'm going to tell you a story of my own biggest plateau and what I did. And kind of delve into a little bit more of the fitness side of that, because I know a lot of you who listen because of your fitness goals, and I know that we cover a lot of different emotional lifestyle topics, but I'm aware a lot of you are budding runners or weightlifters or hybrid trainers or hybrid trainers. So let's take my running and weight loss journey as an example. So the longest plateau I had was 7 months, and I've been at this whole journey for about 4 years, which is crazy. I cannot believe it's been 4 years. 2025 feels like we're in the future. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but it's very surreal to me. So I started running in 2020. And by running, I mean walking, jogging. And I started running in 2021. And I had this extraordinary flurry of change when I first began. Just like many of my clients, when you do first sign up for coaching or you talk to a professional and you start changing your habits in your life, you see this massive change because, you're a complete, young little bird and you've never been taught how to fly. And all of a sudden you're flapping your wings and you feel like, oh my gosh, there's all of this incredible change happening around me and I feel so amazing. And I feel like I'm just flying. And then you hit, a bit where you're just, maybe the wind is a little bit stronger and you're finding it quite hard to kind of soar up the way you used to. And that's exactly what happened to me on my weight loss journey about 1.5 years, 2 years in, because I took it very, very slowly. As we all know, I'm a huge believer in taking things slow to do them fast. And I'd lost, a lot of weight already. I think it was like 50 pounds or something. And I was happy, I was like thriving. I was having a great time. It was summer. I was just getting into trying to run further than 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers. So I was thinking next up is 5K. And that was, unreal, unheard of, couldn't believe it. But I'd hit a plateau, and I hit a plateau for 7 months. And there was a part of me who believed that, well, maybe that's it. Maybe like my dreams of being ultra fit, or my dreams of being like this other person, or emulating this athlete that I like and I look up to, maybe that isn't for me. Maybe I'm happy with just jogging around the park and that's that. And in that 7-month plateau, I went into kind of quite a bad period of my mental health, because what was so frustrating was I felt that I was doing everything right and I deserved better results, and I wasn't seeing them because everything had slowed down, because I had adapted. So the load that I was putting in, I had adapted. I'd become fitter. I was recovering better. My body was stronger. So what I had to do was increase the load. Now, that was something that I think a part of me was hesitant to do, because it was very hard to do. Up until that point, I think I'd done something extraordinary, and I was dabbling in sobriety. And as many of my clients do, they do get to around a sort of 5 kilometer and they're feeling really happy and really good. And then sometimes there's this period of nothingness and things stop changing, and then the motivation drops because we're so used to week on week seeing these changes. The wheels are turning, the fire's burning, and then it stops or it slows down and we think, oh my God, freak out. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to change this. I need to see these results in order to continue. But the only thing that would have ruined my progress wasn't the plateau, but it would have been me giving up just before extraordinary, just before it all happened for me. And I remember there was one point where I was in Scotland with my family, visiting, and on the train ride home, which is a beautiful, if you've travelled from, my family are from Dundee, but Dundee to London, it's the most stunning train ride in the world, and it's such a treat, and I always look forward to it. It's quite a long train. It's like 5-6 hours. Actually, no, way longer. It's like 8 hours, I think. But it's stunning. It goes through the Highlands. You go over the Firth of Forth, the glittering Tay. It's brilliant. Like, it's a train ride I've done every year since I can remember. It's a very emotional thing for me. And it's a time that I've always been incredibly reflective. And that one summer, I'd started running and I'd gone to Scotland and I'd tried to run in Scotland. And I remember running down Broughty Ferry Beach, where my family live, and getting to the castle, Broughty Castle, and not being able to breathe, literally not being able to breathe, and having to stop on the bench outside there. And I had my head in my hands, just crying tears, thinking, why isn't this happening for me? Why can't I make this work? I'm doing everything right and nothing is changing, and I don't know why. I don't know why I can't make this work. And so on the train ride home, instead of sulking, because I was sulking a lot, and I remember this feeling of feeling like I was completely trapped in my body. Like I didn't know how to get out. Like I could feel inside of me there was this like little fledgling runner and like fit human being. Like in my mind's eye, it was so clear who I wanted to be, and I couldn't get there. She was just there and I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't reach out and touch her. I felt like every time I tried, it just got harder, and my breathing was heavier and my footsteps were heavier, and I just couldn't do it. And that summer was incredibly difficult, not seeing those results. But on the train ride home, I decided that I was going to sit down and I was going to take real stock of what I wanted. And for me, that was the first time I thought, I think alcohol might be holding me back. And now I look back and I know it was, because I was doing everything right, but I was drinking a lot in the evenings, and it was meaning I wasn't recovering, and I was smoking as well, and that was difficult for my running. So of course, the habits that are the most insidious are the ones that we don't want to admit to ourselves that we're doing, and we don't want to admit that we're sabotaging ourselves with them. And yet, freeing myself from those is the last clause of that lifestyle that I had to get out of myself in order to be the person I wanted to be. And had I not have taken stock on that train ride and had a real honest chat and gaze in the mirror of self-reflection and honesty, and say, okay, I think I'd like to try and do this the way I want to do this. And I remember I gave myself a rule. I thought, right, this is going to be really hard, but I'm going to give it a month. Like I'm going to try for a month. I'm going to just pretend to be an athlete for a month. I'm not going to smoke. I'm going to try and cut down my drinking. I knew I wouldn't be able to just like go cold turkey, because that probably would have made me quite ill at that point. But I wanted to cut down from not drinking every day. And so I did. Yeah, I gave myself a month and it all changed. And that's what broke the plateau. And I think a lot of time it's about honesty with our habits and honesty with ourselves. And as we spoke in the episode about everyone's an athlete, that kind of extraordinary drive, if that feels scary to you, I think looking at it as a temporary goal is a really good way to kind of nudge yourself into becoming this person, or thinking, I'll give it a go for 2 weeks, dude. 2 weeks of extraordinary pressure on myself that I'm going to do this. And I bet you after those 2 weeks, you'd be like, man, that was cool. That was really cool. And look at what I've achieved, and I'm going to keep going. So that's just a little story of my own plateau. And since then, there have been loads, right now I'm finding it really difficult to build back after having a bit of a nervy bee and losing a load of muscle and also a lot of performance. But I'm getting there, I'm running faster, I'm running further. I'm going to run the London Marathon this year because, I couldn't say no. So it feels good to have goals that are like glittering on the horizon, and I know that they're there. And right now I might be a wee bit wounded still, but I can reach out and get them, and they're there for me when I want them. And that's really, really exciting. So I have a theory, which is the just before theory. Now, the just before theory is something I see in clients. I've seen it in friends. I've seen it in family members. And I think the general population has this idea that there is like a separation between people who achieve amazing things and then the rest of us. And the rest of us are just before, or maybe they're just before the just before. Now, the just before are people who are not yet illuminated to themselves. Perhaps they don't know what they want, and they don't know how to go about knowing what they want. They don't know how to go about change, or who they are, or what their intrinsic desires are, or, how to really feel themselves in the world and go after things. Then there's the people who are just before, who know what they want. Really and truly in honesty, if you ask them what is it that you want, they could tell you. But they stop when it gets difficult. They stop just before. And there's a huge part of the population who never quite make it to the extraordinary things that you see because they stop just before. And my theory is that so many of us are in that space because we are terrified of being embarrassed to admit that we want more, and we're terrified to try and push it to the next level because there is pain and discomfort and embarrassment in that. And being stuck in the just before is a slow death, but it's also a sacrifice of yourself and your dreams. And I think many of us are in that space and don't even know that we are. And this goes back to the theory of there are many timelines stretching out in front of you, and the path you put yourself on is the future that you make for yourself. That's how you get there. And if you are in the just before, it's a wonderful place to be because it's exciting, because who knows what's going to happen next. But it also means that in that space, it's uncomfortable because you're not quite at brilliant, but you're not quite behind. And it's really hard to know how you're going to break through that barrier. But I think recognizing that you're there is a really lovely way of starting to think about, okay, maybe this just is the slog before it gets great. If I think about friends, especially recently in fitness and business goals, if I think of a couple of friends who have done some pretty cool things recently, they have all been in the just before, and there have been many shaky phone calls where they're like, man, I am really embarrassed to release this. I'm really embarrassed to tell people this is something that I want. This is really hard work. Like, I'm working overtime. I'm really tired. I don't know if this is going to pay off. And if they stopped there, they're going to live in the just before forever. And that timeline never opened up for them. But if they just took that next step and just pushed a little bit harder, just like I did back in 2020 when I thought, you know what, I'm maybe going to cut down on my drinking and see where that unfolds. Next thing you know, I'm racing through Utah. It's crazy. Like, those are the amazing moments. I was in Spain last week with my lovely friend Zana, who's been on this show. We took 2 days off for the weekend to go to Spain and run up a volcano. And I was at the top of this volcano. It's the highest, one of the highest mountains in the Canary Islands, and obviously weeping at the top of a volcano, but just thinking back to that time on that train in the just before, and kind of thinking, my God, if I hadn't have been real with myself and I hadn't have admitted, man, this is going to be hard, but this is going to be so worth it. And I'm now standing up here on this mountain and there's eagles flying past and I'm looking at this volcanic ash and like, I would never be here. And I ran up here. Like, incredible change awaits you if you just take that step out of the just before. So the first step to moving past a plateau is understanding why you are stuck. There are usually 3 common culprits. One is burnout, which we've spoken about. Have you been pushing too hard without rest? Sometimes your mind and body just need to recover. So I really wanted to give this a little bit more time here because I think this is something that a lot of people don't know and don't appreciate about plateauing in your progress. Is often we think that means we have to push harder. And sometimes there are applications where, you have to increase the load, you've got to do more work, whatever it looks like to you. But I would argue, and oftentimes in my own performance, in my own journey, and with clients, that sometimes rest is the answer. Rest is the key. Recovery is the answer. So if you think of your training and your change or whatever it is you're trying to do as 2 kind of like orbs, let's imagine. So the training is where the action is, and that's like a really hot orb, and that's where everything's happening, and it's like burning, 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 and there's so much energy going into that, right? That's where it's all happening. It's all happening. And then in the other orb, which is like a really calm orb, if you're following this is how my brain works. This is how I explain things to people I work with. And I think it works. So visualizing this, this is the rest, this is the recovery, right? So this is like really, really hot and burning, and the recovery is this lovely, like very calm place. So the rest is actually where the change is. Okay. And I know that that can be hard to comprehend, but let's take weightlifting, for example, because it's an easy one to explain. You do heavy deadlifts, you increase your load over a number of weeks, you're doing progressive overload. When you're lifting heavy weights, how you build muscle is by tearing your muscles, and that's in that orb of action. But muscle grows at rest. The same goes for when you're doing all your training with your running. So you're doing tempo session, long run, intervals, sprints, hill repeats, whatever it looks like in your training split. That's where the action is. Action, action, action. Amazing, amazing, amazing. But the adaptation to that training is in the recovery. So that's in the long sleeps. That's in, periods of rest where you're doing things that are disconnected to your training. It's in your physio, in your stretching. That's when your adaptations are happening. You're building your aerobic base. You're building your muscular and skeletal adaptations to being able to run far and faster. So just remember those two orbs. If you're feeling freaked out and you feel like you're not making progress, I think making sure there's a balance between those is incredibly important. Like I know when I now need to take a deload week, for example, because my progress will stall. I'm not running as fast. I'm finding it hard to run far, or I'm not enjoying it. I know, cool. Time to pull back, time to do a deload week. It's time to really focus on my recovery, because that is where action and change happens, but you can't have one without the other. And knowing how to balance them is a really fine art. And if you don't have a coach, a really helpful practice can be just like a daily check-in with your energy levels. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Like, deep down when you're doing too much. It gets to a point when you know that rest is productive, and that's when the change is going to occur. So please remember that those two have to be in balance. And oftentimes when you hit plateaus, it can mean because you have to take a break or a step back. It's not just burning out physically, it's burning out mentally. Like if you are working towards a goal, it can go from exciting to fatiguing pretty quickly. Like if you look at the end of a marathon block, for example, you start the marathon block, you're like, this is the best thing I've ever done. Like, I have my training plan. I have my new trainers. I'm going to get a medal. This is so exciting. And then, 8 weeks down the line, you're like, I'm exhausted. I'm terrified of being injured. I'm eating more than I can possibly afford. I don't know how I'm going to keep this up. My body feels inflamed. Then it's like, okay, time for a deload week, And then all of a sudden, 2 days of rest later, you're like, yes, let's go again. And that is another way of breaking a plateau. So it's important to remember that part of it as well. On the other hand, number 2 is lack of challenge. So if you're doing the same thing over and over, your mind and body adapts and the results stop coming. Progress thrives on variety and actually doing the work, actually eating well. What are you brushing under the carpet? So again, this goes back to my point of gazing in the mirror of self-reflection, which is taking an honest inventory of where you are and the tools you have available to you at the time. But what are you brushing under the carpet? I had a few bad habits creep in at the tail end of last year that I thought I'd said goodbye to forever. And no, here they are. An interesting one is my ability to self-destruct when things start going wrong and self-chastise, which I really thought I had got rid of. I thought my coping mechanisms were run, eat well, therapy, call a friend. Oh no, the monsters, those monsters. I think when you've been in a place of addiction and depression for a long time, it can be very hard to completely release those coping mechanisms. So I had habits, spring back up. And not only did the habits spring back up, my mind started to suppress the fact that the habits were springing back up. So when I was no longer seeing results in my training and my mental health and my work, I was like, well, I don't know why this is happening because I'm doing everything right. But really, when it came down to it, and when I was very, very honest with myself and I stopped the avoidance and the distractions and, took an honest look, I knew exactly what I was doing wrong. So today, my challenge to you, my journal task for you, let's say, is sit down and answer the question, what am I avoiding? What am I brushing under the carpet? You know, you don't need to write it down. Perhaps you could just think it now, because sometimes our mind, I mean, it can play tricks, and it does such a good job of hiding pain, because, you know, we do the best we can with the tools we have at the time, right? So when I think back to like smoking and drinking, that was because I was in a lot of pain, and that was the quickest way out of pain. And those habits can be incredibly hard to own up to, because they are buried so down deep, because we're so scared of losing that release. But being honest and holding up the mirror is the first step to change. And it could be the way that you break through a plateau. So do an honest inventory today. What are things that I'm not doing? What are things that I'm not, you know, being mindful of? Is there anything that I could change in the way that I speak to myself, do to myself? That's my challenge to you today. And number 3 is unclear goals. You might have lost sight of your why. It's easy to feel directionless. You know, make a plan. That's the core of it. I think, although I am, you know, I'm a huge fan of training intuitively and following your mind and your body. When it comes to periods like this in your life, there is such power in having a plan. A goal without a plan is just a dream. A goal with a plan is a promise. And when I realized that, it really, really hit home that, okay, there are periods in my life where, yes, I want to run through the woods and listen to classical and be airy-fairy and listen to my body. It's very important. But that's just a dream. But a goal with a plan is a promise. And in so many ways, even just in the act of sitting down with a notepad and making a plan, can change your neuroscience. It can change, you know, it can change everything, because you've sat down, you've written down, this is what I'm going to do. Here's how I get to A to B. I've rethought this. This is the habits I'd like to change. These are the things I'm hiding for myself. And this is Operation Plateau Buster. Okay. These are the ways that we move through it. And as much as it's important to always move with kindness, also with honesty, you have to remember making a plan could be the way out. So take a moment now to reflect which of these feels most true for you right now. So burnout, lack of challenge, or unclear goals. Identifying the root cause of your stagnation is a powerful step towards overcoming it. 9 Lives podcast is proudly sponsored by Pure Sport. As you know, rituals and routines have been a huge part of my own wellness journey and transformation. And I have been using their supplements since the very beginning. Things like their mushroom complex, magnesium, and the muscle balm have honestly changed the game when it comes to my recovery and performance. You can use the code 9lives at checkout for a discount. Thank you so much, Pure Sport, for sponsoring this podcast. So now we're going to talk about finding your spark again, which is the fun part, which is reigniting that fire. So I wanted to give you some more like actionable tools to shake things up, because there is nothing worse than losing your spark. You know, when you see a friend just, they've lost that glitter in their eyes, or you feel like that zest for life, or even the kind of ability to like care about things or make goals, it just disappears and you don't know how to get it back. It can be heartbreaking, because not caring about things and not having that spark, you know, and that flavor of life is really hard to overcome. So I wanted to give you a few tools that have helped me recently in this period of stagnation for myself that I thought could help you. So number 1 is change your routine. Sometimes the smallest tweaks can make a huge difference. Try a new workout, tackle a new skill at work, or even rearrange your workspace. Change breaks the monotony. That's why they say a change is as good as a rest. So you can do this in little tiny ways. For me, often it's about rearranging my office space. Like I'll just move a chair or a desk, or I'll have a big clean, or I'll sit down and I'll think, right, what am I not actually enjoying in my training? What am I not actually enjoying in my nutrition? Is there any little bits that I could change up just to kind of excite myself? Or, you know, is there a new running route that I could take? Like, for example, I've run the Thames Path I mean, every week, 3 times a week for 4 years. And I love that path. That path changed my life. That path has seen every version of myself, you know. When I think about that one simple river path has seen me at obese, starting out, going for that first walk. It's seen me run my first mile. Then it's seen me red in the face, gasping for air, running a 5K. Then I ran my first half marathon, and then I ran my first marathon on my birthday for a chocolate medal. And then I ran the Thames Path Ultra, my first ever ultra marathon. That path has seen every version of me. But man, I've run that path a lot. So recently I have changed and I've gone to a different way, around a park. So, you know, little changes like that just kind of make me think, oh, that's some new stimulus for my brain. Very exciting. I think that's why I love running in different countries so much. Like, you'll never find a happier me than when I wake up somewhere that I have no idea where I am. And I'm like, it's wilderness time, baby. Put the vest on, get the survival gear, off I go into the jungle. No idea where I am. That's like the happiest I can ever be because it's new stimulus and it's a change to the routine. So yeah, change breaks the monotony and can definitely reignite that spark, even if it feels like you are walking through treacle to do so and you don't want to do it. I dare you to change something and try something new, and it will definitely help you find your spark again. So number 2 is set some fresh goals. So revisit your original goals and adjust them. Maybe you've outgrown them, or you can challenge yourself to dream bigger or refine what you're aiming for. So yeah, like have a look back and think, you know, what are my goals? Do my goals still align with me? Do I even still want that for myself anymore? Number 3 is finding inspiration. This is a big one. Surround yourself with people, content, and experiences that inspire you. Read a new book, listen to a podcast, or attend a new workshop. For example, when I feel very lost, I will always go to art galleries. This is something I've always done. I'll go to a comic book shop or I'll go to an art gallery. There's a few in London that are brilliant, that are my favorites. It's a place called Orbital Comics. I just lived there when I was a teenager. And I am a huge fan of National Gallery in the V&A, and often I'll go on my own with a notebook and headphones and I'll just sit and I'll look at paintings, or I'll go and I'll look at, you know, like medieval armor. I don't know. Here we go. Medieval armor I'm incredibly interested in because of the engravings on the armor. You can look close, and within them there's depictions of like huge scenes of animals and, you know, witches and magicians and like kings and princes and queens and like whole landscapes on these armors. And when I go and I look through at these images and I look at these little pieces of history, it sparks so much inspiration in me, and it makes me want to go into battle and pretend to be a knight and run through the fields. And, you know, or when I'm reading a comic book, for example, and I read Tank Girl or Batman or whatever it is, that's so much inspiration for me. And I would urge you that, you know, perhaps if you think that locking in more with your goals and like really dialing down on the training, yeah, that's important, but make sure you're making space for inspiration in other areas of your life, because it's going to help your longevity with your training. Number 4 is celebrating small wins. So progress isn't always huge leaps. Sometimes it's a series of tiny steps. Acknowledge those little victories along the way. So make sure on your long trek up the mountain, you just take those little rests along the way, just to have a little snack and give yourself a little pat on the back. Number 5 is revisit your why. Why did you start this journey in the first place? Reconnecting with your purpose can light that fire again. So that's a really simple one. I know I really hark on about this, but it is so true. Why are we doing this? What is the reason? You know, for a lot of my friends, they just want to grow up to be strong when they're older, or they want to be able to play with their kids or be around for a long time. I've got friends who are doing UTMB this year. So their why is, man, you know, I want to do the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc. That's why I'm training at 9 p.m. in the gym, running 30K on a treadmill. It might look unhinged, but dude, my why is I want to complete that ultra marathon. I want to be on those trails, living in that moment, knowing that when I die, I can look back and say, I fucking did that. That could be your why. Or your why could just be, you know, hey, I want to build some muscle, and I want to, this is the year I'm going to look like a superhero. Whatever it is, it's so important to, you know, tether yourself to that kite of joy. So now we're going to talk about the science of breaking plateaus. I thought it was important to delve into, the ins and outs of how we do this. So, did you know that plateaus are often the result of how our brains and bodies adapt to patterns? The human brain loves efficiency. When we do something repeatedly, our neural pathways strengthen, making the task easier but less stimulating. This is great for habits, but not so great for growth. When you're learning something new, your brain is in a state of neuroplasticity, creating fresh pathways. But as the novelty wears off, those pathways stabilize and progress slows. To break this cycle, you will need to challenge your brain with new stimuli, whether it's a different perspective, a new technique, or a higher level of difficulty. On a physical level, especially in fitness, plateaus occur when your body adapts to stress. This is called homeostasis. To overcome it, you need to add progressive overload, like increasing weights, changing your routine, or adding variety to your workouts. So I think that's a really lovely way of kind of realizing why we plateau and what it is about the brain and the body and how we react to stimuli that makes this happen. And for so many of us, I think we're so used to talking about building habits because it's the repetitive action of the same thing that builds those habits that change our life. And that is very important and really true for so many of us creating new routines for ourselves. But often that can cause plateaus because those pathways stabilize. And knowing that that's a time where you need to switch it up, increase your load, it's really interesting. And I always love to know, how the brain works. I think it's very empowering. So I just wanted to add that one in there. Now I'm going to give you some spiritual practices for reigniting motivation. There is a spiritual side to overcoming plateaus. And I know a lot of you who listen are very spiritual people, as am I. And sometimes what we need isn't more effort, but more alignment. And I wanted to share some spiritual practices that have helped me, especially in the last few months, that might be able to help you if you are in a bit of a plateau. So meditation, which is something that only recently I've been able to do, but spending time each day in stillness, focusing on your breath or on a mantra. Meditation helps you reconnect with your inner self and quiet the mental noise that often accompanies stagnation. So this can look as simple as in the morning or whenever during the day, just putting a hand on your chest, taking a deep breath and just saying, you're doing enough. That's all it could look like. That's a small piece of meditation. Often, there's a lot of worrying around and a lot of freaking out when we think that we've plateaued and we're not seeing progress. And there's a lot of panic. And sometimes just saying, you're doing enough. It can really help to kind of stabilize and reignite that kind of, I am working really hard. Because I also think that, stress is the killer of progress. It really, really is. And the more I've learned about it from last year and everything it did to me and what I've seen it do to friends and family members as well, really doesn't matter how much you train, how many weights you lift or how well you eat. If you are chronically stressed, your body will not adapt to that load. So you're just spinning your wheels for no reason. So making sure you take time out to really give yourself the kudos you deserve is very, very important. So I hope that you manage to do that for yourself. Now, obviously, we've spoken a lot about journaling, but writing down where you are and where you want to go, writing down those patterns and those habits that perhaps you're avoiding can reveal patterns and spark new insights. Gratitude practices, listing 3 things you're grateful every day. I know it sounds like a cliche, but gratitude, it is science, and it shifts your focus from what's missing to what's abundant in your life. So for me, when I really hit that really long weight loss plateau, I had to focus on, okay, but what are you gaining here? Your skin is clearing up, your hair is growing back, you feel more energized. I could feel my brain and my cognitive function starting to work and starting to produce, more opportunities for myself. I was able to walk up and down the stairs better. I felt like I could run for a lot longer. And even though the weight wasn't moving and nothing was working, quote unquote, in my mind, so much was happening, so much was changing. My organs were happier, everything was getting better. And yet, if I shifted my focus to the gratitude, to what I have instead of what I lack, I think it really would have saved me a lot of pain and a lot of time. So visualization, again, we've spoken about this, but spend a few minutes each day imagining your ideal outcome. Visualizing success activates the same areas of your brain as actually achieving it, which can boost motivation. Now, my favorite is a tool I use pretty much every day, which is nature walks. Spend time in nature to ground yourself. The natural world has a way of reminding us of life cycles and the importance of patience, which is so true. Sometimes there's this incredible weeping willow down the path I run, and it's so gorgeous. It's so huge and so old, and the leaves, they kind of dance on the top of the Thames. It's so beautiful on the River Thames, for those who aren't from the UK. And that tree has been there for like hundreds of years. And sometimes when I'm feeling impatient, I'll go and sit next to it and I'll think, this tree has been here for hundreds of years. It's taken this long to grow and bloom and discover itself, and it's still here, and it's still growing so slowly, but it's still growing. And knowing that, we are nature and we are the same way, and things take a very, very, very long time to take hold, but the roots are so strong and that tree's not going anywhere, reminding us of the patterns of nature when it comes to plateaus, is really, really important, a really beautiful way of grounding yourself. So yeah, plateaus are just a part of the process. They're life's way of saying pause, reflect, and grow. This is a mantra that I love. Progress isn't always obvious, but it's always happening. Even when you feel stuck, you're learning, adapting, and preparing for what's next. Trust the process. So before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a challenge. This week, I want you to try something that breaks your routine. It could be as simple as taking a different route to work, or being as bold as starting a brand new project or a new training regime. Whatever it is, make it something that excites you or scares you just a little. And I want you to let me know how it goes. You can reach me on Instagram. You'll know who I am, or on my 9 Lives Instagram. So I want you to give me one habit that you've been avoiding that deep down you want to change. It can be anything. It's a safe space, guys. I'm not going to share these anywhere. You can just use me as someone to talk to. One habit that you've been pushing down inside and you want to change. Something that you find, let's release a bit of shame here. Something that you find hard to admit you want to change. So whether it's vaping or it's self-sabotage or, something, whatever it is that if you stopped, it would change everything. And then I want you to give me one thing that you're going to do this week that's going to break your routine, something bold, something new. Maybe send me a picture of it, whatever it is. It can be something as small as walking home from work instead of taking the bus. It could be whatever it looks like. Those are the 2 challenges this week that I want you to send me, because those are the things that are going to help you break through those plateaus. That's all for today's episode of 9 Lives. Remember, hitting a plateau isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, share it with a friend who might need a little motivation boost. And until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.